fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Today, we are here for our Falcons versus Vikings NFL Week 9 game preview. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, with my guest today. He is Tyler Forness at The Real Forno. It's still The Real Forno, right? I didn't actually check before the show, but
it is still The Real Forno.
Yeah.
You got a good memory.
Yeah. And Tyler, friend of the show, Senior Bowl buddy. We've had you on many times, talk draft as well. But now the Falcons and Vikings are actually playing, so now we have to get takes on our two teams, which, it's kind of dark times for each of us here. Or at least there's quarterback changes on the horizon, so we will obviously be breaking that down for you guys, talk about this matchup a little bit, talk about some trades for both sides, and then get into these matchups because this game has kind of become a little bit of a chaos fest in terms of trying to predict. So we will get to that real quick. Want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, betonline.ag. Folks, the last of the major sports leagues has finally kicked off, and college basketball is getting ready to go as well. BetOnline.ag remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests, whether that be NFL, college football, UFC, or NHL. They're all getting going in full swing, and BetOnline is your number one source for your wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. With all that hoops betting action, along with every sport available at your fingertips, make sure to check out BetOnline on both desktop and mobile with their new mobile app at any time. So head to that website today, betonline.ag, and remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're going to take a quick break here real quick while I bring you this week's slate of prize picks. Folks, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. And just a reminder for those that are joining us for the first time, Prize Picks is a skill-based daily fantasy game where you pick 2 to 6 players and decide if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection. The more players you pick, the more you can win, all the way up to 25 times your money on any entry. And at Prize Picks, since this is daily fantasy, you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projection. So it's a little bit different than other daily fantasy games. Prize Picks also has a very generous promotion schedule, including weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday, so keep your eyes open for those. It's not just the NFL either. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including NBA, MLB, as long as that's still going, NHL, college football and basketball, soccer, esports, many more as well. And Prize Picks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, as well as offering fast withdrawals. It's that easy, guys. And remember, all first-time users that deposit and use our promo code DBB receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. That means if you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. If you deposit 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. Just make sure to use that promo code DBB. It really helps us out. And since Prize Picks is daily fantasy, it is available in 31 states, including Washington, D.C., and most of Canada. It's also the best way to have action on the game in states like California, Florida, Texas, notably Georgia, right? And over 70% of the United States. So there's the map real quick, just for your reference. Let's get to my picks this week. We're going to be going with the new blood, maybe the old blood, I don't know, however you want to phrase it, with Taylor Heinicke, Atlanta's quarterback. Has a very low passing number here, right? 216.5 passing yards. That's Desmond Ridder-esque. The Vikings allow, I think they're about a slightly below average yards per attempt sort of team in the passing game. And if there's one thing Taylor Heinicke is going to do, he's going to throw yards. I don't know if he's going to throw touchdowns or picks or whatever, but I think he's going to throw the yards with this offense. So I'm pretty confident in Taylor Heinicke going more than 216.5 passing yards. We're going to keep going back to the Younghoe Koo. Well, he's almost as automatic as you can get. I think he's failed us maybe like one time in this, maybe twice. And that's it. So Younghoe Koo's almost as safe as you could get. 1.5 field goals. This team, maybe it's a little bit different with Taylor Heinicke. Maybe they're able to get a few more touchdowns, but I do think this team is still going to be trying to kick a lot of field goals, given that I think they're probably going to lay off the aggression a little bit, given how well the defense has been playing, and especially against opponent like the Vikings, who is going to score a lot of points, and you just need to take advantage of those scoring opportunities whenever you can. So Younghoe Koo more than 1.5 field goals made. And then I'm staying away from Vikings players in this one because they are starting a rookie quarterback in Jaren Hall. We don't really have any idea. It could be Will Levis where he goes off. It could be, disastrous start where nothing works. So we're going to pretty much avoid the Vikings in this one. Instead, I'm going to go with one of my guys, Dalton Kincaid, Buffalo's tight end, who's been sort of breaking out over the last several weeks. Been really putting up some impressive numbers. And we're going to go with Dalton Kincaid more than 37.5 receiving yards against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a good team. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. They're going to need to chuck the ball around the yard, Josh Allen in that offense. So I think that Dalton Kincaid's going to be receiving a lot of those targets. He's been getting more and more involved in that offense. He's doubled or tripled this number in the last 2 games. He's doubled it, more than doubled it in the last 2 games with Buffalo. So even if he's less productive than the last 2 games, he should still easily clear that 37.5. So that's what we're going with here, guys. But feel free to use my picks. I've hit I think 2 or 3 of these so far, so it's not like I've been nailing them. But if you want to, take my picks, I think they're well reasoned. I guess you decide. But feel free to use mine or make your own. There's all kinds of options out there. And just make sure if you're signing up for the first time to use our promo code DBB for that 100% deposit match up to $100. And thanks again to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's episode. All right, folks, we're back here with Tyler Forness at The Real Forno to break down this Falcons versus Vikings matchup. And we were expecting, fireworks, with Kirk Cousins playing, I think, his best football of the year going into this game and versus Desmond Ridder, who was definitely not playing his best football of the year going into this game. And now we have 2 completely different quarterbacks. So first, let's talk about the Vikings situation because it seems like that one might be a little bit up in the air. It was expected to be Jaren Hall while the Vikings were sort of looking into options. They did make the trade for Josh Dobbs, but he's basically only going to have a couple of days to acclimate. Do you think it will be Jaren Hall or Josh Dobbs on Sunday?
Kevin O'Connell did confirm that it's going to be Jaren Hall, and I think that's the right call. That Josh Dobbs, they basically got for free. So here are the conditions of the trade. They send a 6th-round pick. They get a conditional 7th. And based on those conditions, which I believe are playing time, that part hasn't been confirmed yet, the Vikings could get sent a 6th back. So essentially, this is a complete just salary dump by the Arizona Cardinals. And the Vikings get a quarterback who at a 4.0 at Tennessee in I think he's a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
Like the dude is genuinely brilliant.
Yeah.
And he's already gone into 2 situations, learned a playbook real quick, and has started games and been a competent quarterback. And at this point, that's what the Vikings need. They need competence at the position and hope that the team are surrounding the quarterback, which, let's be honest, the supporting cast for a new quarterback is one of the best in the National Football League. Bookend elite tackles, an elite wide receiver, an emerging wide receiver, and a really good interior offensive line, plus a defense that is playing out of their mind. So you have a good setup for him. But I still think Jaren Hall is the best bet. If you don't know, I was the highest probably in the industry or in the entire world on Jaren Hall. I love him. And I still keep myself grounded and realistic. He's still a 5th-round pick. It probably won't hit. But if it's going to, it'll be Jaren Hall because he's going to an offense with Kevin O'Connell that basically ran the same things that he did at BYU. BYU just did it out of a lot more spread formations. You're running a lot of the same concepts, a lot of dagger, a lot of rail, a lot like those things are all the same. You're just doing it in a slightly different package. It's like taking a box cake and putting vanilla frosting on it instead of chocolate. Like that's kind of what we're talking about here. And I think Jaren Hall's ability to be mobile and be able to run the football is going to add an interesting element. And how will Kevin O'Connell utilize that? That to me is going to be fun because now you're opening yourself up to RPOs. You're opening yourself up to more bootlegs, option plays. Like the list is endless. And Kevin O'Connell has shown himself to be a very creative play caller. Don't ask the fan base because they just get mad at everything. Kevin O'Connell is a creative play caller and he's building stuff off of other games. And it's evident in the film and it's so fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the Vikings offense has been one of the more interesting ones to watch, certainly this year. And I think Kirk Cousins was sort of looking like he was at the height of his powers, unfortunately, going into that last game where he just carved up the 49ers. And I mean, I think that was one of his best games I've ever seen. I mean, he was in the zone, you could tell he was just on it that game. Just such a huge loss. I mean, what does that do for Vikings fans? I mean, there's not really much you can do about it. It's obviously devastating. How are you guys taking the news?
So it's very interesting. The fan base itself is very divided on Kirk Cousins, and it's almost like what we have with Republicans and Democrats right now. There's very little middle ground anymore. It's either you are one or the other, and it's on the extremes. And there are very few people who are just agnostic and just try to kind of let the film come to them. And that's where I'm at. But it's some people are just really excited now that, oh, we're finally going to move off and this is the year it's going to happen. Others are like, well, now he'll just resign because nobody else is going to want a 35-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. It's really unfortunate that it kind of come down to that, but that's kind of been the whole discussion around Kirk Cousins for the last 5-6 years. So it's really nothing new, but he was playing the best football of his career. And that game against the 49ers, he was surgical. He was doing things that he normally doesn't do. And against the Packers too, he was creating outside of structure. Kirk Cousins, the robot, was creating outside of structure, and it was beautiful. He was making pinpoint throws. He was just doing all these great things. And he stepped wrong in the pocket, which it's a little bit ironic because we would always poke fun at Kirk because of his unwillingness to, or not unwillingness, but he would kind of panic in a clean pocket. And that's how he tore his Achilles. Yeah. He panicked in a clean pocket. And there's been a lot of emotions, and it's so evident that no matter what the fan base thinks, the building loves him. They just adore Kirk Cousins. And you really saw from the quarterback video how much care and effort he puts in. Nobody knew he had a rib injury that last season until July.
Right.
Like, the man has really endeared himself to the entire team. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah yesterday during his press conference, and we're recording this on Thursday, said that I would love to have Kirk back, but it takes two to make a negotiation and make something work. And they couldn't make something work this year to keep him for an extension. The Vikings only wanted to guarantee 2024. The Cousins camp wanted guarantees in 25, and they were unable to come to a conclusion. They were going to say, hey, we'll talk again after the season. So it's a real downer because they won 3 in a row. They're trying to get on the heels of the Detroit Lions, who are up 2 games in the division. But now it's rookie Jaren Hall. And get ready for this image. Kirk Cousins is going to be on his little scooter on the sideline with a helmet on the entire time so he can hear the play calls. He's already said he's going to be in the building to help Jaren Hall. So this is no matter what you think of him, you just feel for him, and he's still going to be there for his team. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kirk Cousins, the arc of his career has always produced sort of hot takes, and he's just kind of a guy that absorbs hot takes. But, I think he's someone that's had to really earn his opportunities in the NFL, and I think he's clearly gotten better. So I hope he's able to come back, and whether that's with the Vikings or elsewhere. I know there's some Falcons fans that want Atlanta to go after Cousins in the offseason. So, I doubt this is the end for him because he looked like he was still playing his best football, and the Achilles injury is obviously really tough to come back from, but for a guy that was never one that was really relying on the athleticism to begin with, probably not going to be as big of a downer for him. Hopefully he's able to come back healthy. But let's talk about the Vikings offense with Jaren Hall, because that is the big question. Can Jaren Hall keep this thing afloat? There's no Justin Jefferson. That's obviously a big loss. He'd be a massive security blanket for a young quarterback like Jaren Hall. But Jordan Addison really coming on. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson is playing like one of the best tight ends in the NFL. What's your expectations for this offense with Jaren Hall, especially in his first start?
Be capable. That's all I want. Just be capable. Don't be a disaster. And his first snaps, it's really hard to judge him off his first snaps because it was inside the 10-yard line at Lambeau Field. The game plan's not centered around you, and you're going in ice cold.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins limps off the field, and we're like, oh crap, what's going on? Did he step wrong? Did he sprain an ankle? And then they showed the video, and you saw the muscle twinge. It's like, oh no. And Hall goes in there, and he gets strip sacked on his third play. But the one interesting thing about Kirk is people make fun of him for being kind of robotic. That's also a good thing, because one thing that he's really able to do well is when he gets in his drop, he hits the same mark every single time. So if it's a 5-step drop, let's say it's 8 yards back, he's going to hit 8 yards each 5-step drop without fail. And the offensive tackles know that. So they know to push the edge rushers around Kirk because they have that benchmark. So they know where they're at and they can guide him around. It looks like the edge rusher's winning, but it's intentional. Darrisaw and O'Neal know where to push them. With Jaren Hall, he's not going to be as consistent, or his drop points are going to be different. So that's why he got strip sacked by Preston Smith. And then he also hit a 3rd and 8 to TJ Hawkinson that went for 11 yards. Like, it wasn't a screen pass. It was a choice route, and he just nailed it. So there were positives, but we only saw him for 11 total snaps. And I think he was 3 or 4 for 23 yards. Not exactly a lot to really garner from that, but the moment didn't look too big for him, and he didn't look like a disaster, and you can build off of that. I want to see what happens when the game plan is centered around him, when he has a full week of reps in practice, when the team builds him up and prepares to go into battle with him. You have Jordan Addison, you have TJ Hawkinson, you have a really good offensive line. The running game sucks. How is he going to impact the running game? What are they going to do to help make the running game better with his abilities to be a dual threat? That is where the real intrigue lies for me. I think he's probably going to finish something like 16 of 28 for 200 yards, 1 or 2 touchdowns, and a turnover. Like, that sounds like a reasonable stat line for him. Not great, not bad, capable. And so touchdowns are inherently random. It's about, can you lead your team to a scoring drive? I don't care if Jaren Hall has 0 touchdowns. I don't care if he has 5. Is the offense scoring? To me, that's going to be the benchmark that I look at the most.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely something that's in the realm of possibility. And, you know, the Falcons defense is not the easiest matchup for the first time in who knows how long, at least since 2017, where the Falcons defense is, you know, about a little better than league average in points allowed. But a lot of that has to do with the offense turning the ball over, I think, a league high 16 times. But in terms of yardage, the Falcons 6th defensively. And in the passing game, 9th in net yards per attempt, 8th in total passing yards allowed, along with very good against the run, 8th in yards per carry allowed on the ground. So the Falcons defense, finally not a slouch, but their one problem and why Will Levis picked them apart was because they just couldn't get pressure on Will Levis. When they did, he threw the ball up and had, I think, 2 turnover-worthy plays on that plays he was actually pressured. But so it's not the easiest matchup for a young quarterback like Jaren Hall, but you know, how do you think the Vikings offense matches up? Obviously, you've got Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson out there, but I know that the run game struggles have been there for you guys.
So I think the real catalyst is going to be no Grady Jarrett. Obviously tore his ACL last week. Massive loss for the Falcons, but from my perspective, interior defensive line felt like a pretty good strength, and then you strengthened it at the trade deadline with Contavious Street from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Vikings just need to play their own game. They need to be consistent. They need to not panic and take advantage of Atlanta Falcons cornerback Mike Hughes, former Minnesota Viking. They need to take advantage of some of those younger corners. And when AJ Terrell is on whoever, just try to kind of stay away. Don't let Terrell have an opportunity to make a play. And with Kevin O'Connell's creative play calling, he has the ability to design plays to get guys open. Just get guys open and let Hall find them. Build some confidence early. Get a couple of easy completions, like right away. Run dagger and just play action off of it, and then just hit the dig route at 10 yards. And hey, there we go. We're cooking. We're moving. And I think this Falcons defense is good. I think they're going to cause some issues for the Vikings, but I also don't think it's this impenetrable unit. I think the Vikings can still be able to move the ball. They can still generate some explosives, and the Vikings just have to play their own game. If they do that, I think that they're going to be okay. They also have to hold the ball. They've turned the ball over in every single game so far this season, and they almost finished the Green Bay game with that one, but that Jaren Hall strip sack I mentioned earlier. Just play your own game. Be disciplined and figure out a way to either run the football or get a quick passing game to be able to move the chains that way.
Yeah. And fingers crossed we don't have to see Mike Hughes because he's not starting for the Falcons, thankfully. But he is, I believe, their like primary depth guy, fourth cornerback sort of player. So we will see. But yeah, we've got AJ Terrell, obviously, who was victimized by a pretty egregious offensive pass interference last week from DeAndre Hopkins, but that's just sort of what DeAndre Hopkins does. So you just got to chalk those up sometimes. But Jeff Okudah from the Lions has actually been almost on par with AJ Terrell this season. Seems to finally be healthy and playing great across from him. And then it's actually undrafted CFL player D. Alford in the slot that's been coming on and playing great. Really, the problem with the Falcons defense is it's a new scheme. They're still vulnerable to some coverage busts, particularly in zone where they've not played as well. They've been great in man. So, potential there. That's really how Levis beat them. He threw the ball to wide open receivers when there was a busted coverage. And, nothing against Will Levis. I mean, those were some beautiful, beautiful balls to wide open receivers, but we haven't exactly seen a lot of that in Atlanta so far. But it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings choose to attack it. And with the ground game sort of struggling, I wonder, if it's going to be mostly a pass-centric attack or if they're going to, I know it's Alexander Mattison, and then you guys traded for Cam Akers too, right?
Akers has looked better than Madison, to be honest. And considering when you looked at his first game this year, 22 carries for 23 yards, there wasn't really a lot to be excited about. And you knew he was coming off that Achilles injury in 2021. 2022 was a big up and down year. And then there were issues with him in the organization. And then those issues resurfaced at the beginning of the year. The Vikings basically got him for free. And they don't actually have to give up any compensation if Cam Akers doesn't, it's either 400 or 500 yards if he doesn't amass that amount. He's free. And yeah, Akers has looked more of what the player that we thought we were getting coming out of Florida State. I don't think he's great, but Madison, like the nicest guy in the world, works extremely hard. He's just not seeing the field, and he's not doing the things that you need to do as a running back. Like, running backs with great athleticism are awesome. And I'm not saying Madison has that. I'm just talking in a vacuum. But if you can't see and you can't make quick decisions in the hole and pick the right hole to go through, none of that matters. And Madison is just not seeing the field well enough. He's not reading his blockers, and in a zone running scheme, you have to have that. That's paramount. That's why you see guys all of a sudden in a zone scheme burst out for 1,000 yards. Like, who is this guy? But I'm very intrigued to kind of see how Akers continues to develop. Last week, they finally did a 50-50 split. You wouldn't know it from snap counts. What they do is they rotate series. Madison's series just always seem to take a lot longer than Akers' series. So that's kind of how they're handling it right now. So it is a real committee.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. And it seems like the tackles are great. Like Christian Darrisaw, he's healthy. He's playing fantastic football. Brian O'Neill playing great football still at right tackle. The interior may be a little bit shakier, and I'm curious because the Vikings traded away Ezra Cleveland after signing Dalton Reisner. What was your sort of thought process on that? I think Cleveland had actually been playing pretty well, but I think Reisner, maybe his addition sort of made Cleveland a little bit expendable.
Yeah. So the kind of the backstory with Reisner here, he and offensive line coach Chris Cooper, one of them was in the other's wedding. I can't remember which way it was. They have a very, very close relationship, and the Vikings didn't have Cleveland in their long-term plans because there were rumors that he wanted to play left tackle. Because remember, out of Boise State, he was a left tackle. They moved him inside to guard out of necessity, and he never got that chance to play tackle because they drafted Christian Darrisaw in 2021. And who can blame him for starting Darrisaw at left tackle? He's one of the best in the NFL. And looking at things, Reisner came in and played really well for them. And it was only a 2-game sample size. Cleveland was better. And that's like the fan base was clamoring, sign Reisner, because the overarching thought is Ed Ingram absolutely stinks. Ed Ingram's fine. He's got his warts, but he's a second-year player and he's showing real growth. You don't just stunt that. And Reisner came in and played admirably well, and Cleveland is not somebody that they have plans for. Chris Reed, their backup guard center, is about to come off NFI. He practiced in full for the first time on Wednesday. Since training camp started, he hasn't even been on the practice field. So looking at all those factors, they traded him to the Jaguars. They only got a 6th, which we all thought was really, really low. But the compensatory 5th is likely what he would have fetched with a comp pick. And the pick that they got was the Panthers' 6th round pick. So that's probably a top 3 pick in the round, which is basically a comp 5th. You get it a year earlier.
Yeah.
Would you like to get more? Sure. But sometimes the market won't give you that. And they wanted to sell off the asset, and it saved about, I think, like $600,000 in cap space, because his final year of his rookie contract was about $2.8 million. And they had Josh Dobbs. I think he had like $880,000 left on his deal this year.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out. You'd like the comp to be more, but I think the Vikings offensive line will be fine. They have confidence in the guys that they have behind the starters, and the starters have been playing well. So I think at the end of the day, you'd like to have them, but it's a luxury you can't afford.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense to me. I know you mentioned the injury report. Any players that you're sort of monitoring? I think Dean Lowry was DNP. We had quite a few limited players, but any of those guys that you have concern about playing on Sunday?
Maybe Brian Asamoah, but he's essentially been a complete backup and special teams guy. Even Lowry's kind of played bad this year. He's had a couple like, whoa, hey, finally, we are seeing a good version of Dean Lowry. But if he doesn't play, you're going to see a lot more Jaquelin Roy, the 5th round rookie out of LSU. And going into the year, Bleacher Report actually had Roy as a 1st round pick to the Vikings in those way too early 2023 mock drafts. So he was viewed very highly, but that LSU team was an adjunct disaster last year, especially on defense. So it kind of makes some sense. And now you're looking at a team that could really use a guy like Jaquelin Roy, especially in the run game.
Yeah, no question. And kind of switching gears to that the Falcons offense versus the Vikings defense. It's definitely been sort of like the Falcons, sort of a meteoric rise from what it was the previous year with a new defensive coordinator. You guys brought in Brian Flores, who I think some Falcons fans had their eye on. Falcons brought in Ryan Nielsen. It seems like both have definitely stamped their mark on a defense that was sort of maligned and turned it into something at the very least respectable in this season. And you guys got my guy, Ivan Pace Jr. We were both there at the Senior Bowl. Like, wow, this guy's going to get drafted. Doesn't get drafted. Can't believe it. He's playing great, like we all thought. So kudos to you guys for actually taking advantage of that. But yeah, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this Vikings defense? Because we're going to see Taylor Heineke at quarterback for the Falcons. We don't really know exactly if it'll look different and if it'll look the same. We know the Falcons want to run the ball, but sort of what's the Vikings' strengths and weaknesses?
Coverage bust, I'd say, is probably the biggest weakness as far as like an overall. The whole idea of Ed Donatell's version of the Vic Fangio scheme last year was to make them beat you by paper cuts. The Vikings are actually doing that this year. You're not seeing a lot of explosive plays, but teams are being able to sustain some drives. But some of the bigger ones, it's coverage bust based on not getting pressure. So the Vikings run the most 3-man and 5+ man pressures in the league, and they're last in 4-man pressures. So they're doing a lot of drop 8 and they're doing a lot of blitzing. So if the pressure doesn't get home, especially in those 3-man, and you run like a cover 3 beater, and all of a sudden, after like 6 seconds, a guy gets behind the cornerback, like Jaden Reed got behind Byron Murphy Jr. last week because of just a cover 3 beater where the middle of the field safety ends up over on the right side of the field, and he just sneaks right behind. But Jordan Love had the ball for like 5 seconds before he threw it. Those are the kind of things the Vikings are susceptible to right now. They're also susceptible to just the running game in general. They really stifled the 49ers by running a lot of 5-man fronts, and they played a lot of penny. They played a lot of dime with 3 safeties. They were doing some insane stuff. They played 2 linebackers on the field at once, a total of 12 times against the 49ers. They were running 3 safeties the entire game, and it worked. And I'm curious if they do that against the Falcons because of kind of how the Falcons are built and how Arthur Smith really likes to operate the offense. It's not too dissimilar from what Kyle Shanahan likes to do. So expect to see a lot of 3 safeties and a lot of 5-1, like 4-1-6 dime. It's going to be interesting. And this defense is aggressive, but they're disciplined. And I think that's one of the reasons why those young players from the 2022 draft class, I'm losing my train of thought. They're very aggressive players by nature, but I don't think they're playing disciplined football. And if you're not playing disciplined within an aggressive scheme, that's a killer. That's how you get those huge explosives over the top. You have to play disciplined within your responsibilities. And the Vikings have done a really good job so far of that. Josh Metellus being kind of the main catalyst. They signed him to a 2-year extension before the season, and he's rewarded them. He has been, everybody wants that safety linebacker hybrid. Metellus is that safety linebacker hybrid, and it's been a revolution for them. And I think this defense, I think you're going to have a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's not like sit back and just get carved up defense. It's like, well, we're either going to have a great play or we're going to get a big, or we're going to give something up, but they're going to be aggressive and it's going to be fun to watch. And that's infinitely preferable to the boring defense that just gives up a ton of points every week. And that's unfortunately, I think, what both of us were dealing with last year. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Falcons do choose to attack the Vikings, because they've still put up plenty of yards on the ground, but they haven't been nearly as efficient as last year. They're just sort of middle of the pack in yards per carry. But it does seem like, the Vikings line has been pretty good at putting pressure on the quarterback, but the run, maybe not so much. And then the cornerbacks, like you said, maybe a little bit more vulnerable to giving up the big play. But it looks like they're really strong at safety. Like you said, obviously Harrison Smith's still there. I think Cam Bynum's been having a great season. And then Josh Metellus, again, sort of been the catalyst for, I think, a lot of the improvements on this defense. But your outside corners are struggling. So if you were coming up with a game plan to attack the Vikings, what would you sort of suggest?
Repeat that for me, because
it's okay.
It kind of blanked in my mind. What?
Oh no, you're good.
What was that question? Because you said a lot.
There was a lot of points. Yeah, I was trying to throw a lot at you. Yeah. Well, we record this in the morning, folks. So it's always a dicey proposition. But so if you were coming up with like a game plan to attack this Vikings defense, what would you sort of suggest for the Falcons?
Get the run consistently, make them focus on it, and beat them with play action. And they play a lot of off man. They also play a good amount of like drop cover 3. They do a lot of inverted cover 2. And the biggest thing, you just got to be consistent and be patient and block. If you do those 3 things, like this defense theoretically is not that hard to beat, because they're just really aggressive and they try to get you frazzled. They blitzed Justin Herbert 80% of the time. So we're giving you 2 seconds to throw the football. You better throw the football in those 2 seconds or we're going to demolish you. Justin Herbert threw for 400 some yards and 3 touchdowns because he got the ball out in like his average time to throw was like 2.2 seconds. They made him throw the ball super quick and he was able to. Not everybody can do that. And they've been approaching people differently. They blitzed Mahomes like 50% of the time. Mahomes, until that Denver game, probably played his worst game against the Vikings. It was like 280 yards and I think 2 scores. The Vikings were in that game, and they probably should have won that game, but they didn't because of their own faults. Not because of anything the Chiefs did, because the Vikings continue to screw up. And their lack of discipline is what's killed them. But I don't know how they'll handle Taylor Heineke, because he is like, the organization as a whole knows him. If he doesn't, I don't know if you know this story. When Teddy Bridgewater got hurt, they would have started Taylor Heineke that year. But a couple weeks earlier, at training camp, Heineke kicked in his apartment window because he locked himself out and he shredded an ankle or tendon in his ankle. And he was out for, I think, like 3 months. And because of that, he didn't play in that 2016 season. And they probably don't trade for Sam Bradford because they have Taylor Heineke. Wow. So fun story. But yeah, he's a gunslinger. North Turner loved him because of how he liked to attack down the field. But just like Case Keenum was for the Vikings in 2017, he's got those bozo gene moments where it's like, what in the world are you doing, dude? It's like 2 of those a game. Can the Vikings take advantage of those 2? And can they put enough pressure on him to get a third or a fourth bozo moment from him? And I think that chess match is going to be really fun to watch. But with the Vikings defense, take what they give you, block, and be consistent. You can do that. They're beatable. Like, they're not this elite defense, but they will sucker you into making stupid mistakes. And if you fall into that trap, that's when you're in trouble.
Yeah, and the Falcons' offensive line has been pretty good at blocking up the run, less so blocking up the pass, especially Caleb McGarry on the right side, and I imagine he's going to get a healthy dose of Danielle Hunter.
How's that contract feel right now?
Well, at least they didn't give him the what was the other guy that got that huge payday? He went to the Chiefs. At least they didn't give him that money, but yeah. So they didn't give him the $20 million a year. It's only 11.5, and they can get out of it basically in a year. So but he's still a really good run blocker. We're probably drafting a tackle in the second round this year. But the rest of the offensive line has been pretty good. Matthew Bergeron, he's been taking his lumps at left guard, but he's started to stabilize there, and he's definitely not been a liability. And then we've got Drew Dahlman playing amazing football as a blocker and snapping the ball low all the time. So that's a fantastic issue to have. And then, of course, Chris Lindstrom has sort of returned to being one of the premier guards in the NFL. So it's a good offensive line. Bijan Robinson, after his just bizarre health game, whatever, headache game, migraine game, not exactly sure what to call it.
I still haven't stopped hearing about that from my wife. My wife started playing fantasy football a couple years ago. And she's yelling at me like, well, what about Bijan? I'm like, hey, I just want to point out this happens in college fantasy football all the time. I'm in Thor's 50-team league. Made the playoffs for the second straight year. Very proud of that. I should have won the division, and I'm mad about it. But the tiebreakers are based off total points, not head-to-head, because I beat the guy head-to-head. But in college fantasy football, that's how it happens. You don't announce. Sometimes you don't get announced at all. You'll lose a quarterback. Oh, after the kickoff. Oh, Cam Rising's not playing today. That happened to a guy last year. It's like, oh shit, really? And
that's why the NFL has these rules. Yeah.
Well, it's also the flu. I bet he just woke up like puking, said, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm good to go," and then all of a sudden he starts going, and it's like, okay, this ain't happening, and it's just one of those things. It sucks.
Yeah, it does. It's annoying, but he's playing again. Obviously, I think he's third in the NFL in yards per carry, so he's been great. It's been kind of crazy watching them have him run option routes and stuff like that. It's like, okay, maybe calm down a little bit with that. Like, he's a rookie running back. Okay, like, I know you want him to become Deebo Samuel, but maybe like give him a year to become Deebo Samuel. Don't have him run option routes as a rookie running back. But no, we've loved Bijan. I know you were a fan of Bijan as well coming out. So that'll be fun. That's been fun no matter what. But yeah, I'm interested to see, because, like you said, the Vikings extremely aggressive. They're going to blitz the hell out of you. We know Heineke historically has handled the blitz well. He has, I think, some of his best stats against the blitz. So I do wonder if the Vikings turn up the aggression, or, knowing that about Heineke, if they sort of tamp it down slightly and see if they can bait him into some mistakes. But I think we're all expecting him to handle it better than Desmond Ridder would have. So, we'll see if that produces any better results for the Falcons. Obviously, when Heineke came in against the Titans down big, he basically did everything he could to lead that comeback, and didn't quite end up working out due to a variety of factors, including a drop pass on fourth down that was just wide open by Van Jefferson. Shout out to new Falcons wide receiver Van Jefferson, but
Gator legend.
But hey, we'll allow the one Van Jefferson. He's new to the team, so that's your one drop. Let's get it together now, Van. I do like Van. I think he's got some potential to do some stuff for this Falcons
team. You know who his
team.
dad is, right?
I should.
Falcons legend Sean Jefferson.
Oh, well, there you go. Dropping some info nugs on here. Yeah, see? This is why we have you on, Thor. You got all that insider info about all the Gator grades.
I know I look like Thor, but I have
oh my gosh, yeah. Well, you're both Vikings analysts, and you have and you've got the hair, so I'm thinking like, well, I did see a bunch of like Thor costumes, on Tuesday, so maybe that's what I'm thinking too. But
next year, I think I'm gonna dress up as that picture of Thor that he has his profile picture, where it's him with the gopher hoodie and the sunglasses and the stogie.
There you go.
That's gonna be my costume next year.
Yes. Well, I mean, you do look like Thor. You two should switch names, because you actually look like Thor. But
I do.
But Tyler, really appreciate all your insights today, guys. He's Tyler Forness at The Real Forno. What are you thinking about this game, Tyler? What's your prediction? How you feeling?
I don't know. And this is something I've been kind of battling with. The line moved significantly with Kirk Cousins. It went from Vikings being 1.5 point favorites to 4.5 point dogs. That's a 6 point swing. That's significant.
Yeah.
And I still think the Vikings can win this game. They
certainly can.
I think they'll cover. I don't think the Falcons are a team that's going to be able to blow the Vikings out. I'm also incredibly high on Jaren Hall and really believe in Kevin O'Connell as an offensive guru and somebody who can develop a quarterback and really help maximize that, because he has already done it with Kirk Cousins. He maximized Kirk Cousins. And it's obviously different maximizing a seasoned veteran versus maximizing a rookie. I think he's going to devise a game plan to get him comfortable, get him playing well, get his confidence up. The whole team seems to be behind him. Let's see where this goes. I think this screams 23-20. I don't know who necessarily wins, but I think a 23-20 kind of game feels right. Slightly, I think this would actually hit the over, because I think the over is only at like 35 points for obvious reasons. You've got a real quarterback like weirdness in there. And I know last week's Falcons game was a 35.5 over under. Well, Mayo Boy blew through that pretty quick, but
yeah, and Heineke put up some points too. So.
And Heineke can do that. He can do that in bunches. 23-20 feels right because of what the defenses are too. And somebody's going to win the game. I just don't know who.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride for the Falcons and the Vikings. Honestly, these teams feel kind of similar in that they've, I think the Vikings obviously offensively played a lot better, but two teams whose defenses had a massive change schematically, had brought in some new pieces and had big uplifts, basically, statistically speaking, now dealing with quarterback changes at the same time as well. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a chance the Falcons win this by a touchdown, but I tend to never predict that big of a split for this Falcons team. It just seems like they always play close games. It really, I think it, like you said, I think it comes down to the play of the quarterbacks. Can Taylor Heineke play like he did in that second half against the Titans? Because if so, he played basically flawless football and crushed it. Now, is Taylor Heineke's probably not going to play like that every week? Can we get that this week? If so, Falcons probably got a good shot. Can the Falcons defense cut down on those coverage busts and put a little pressure on Jaren Hall? Maybe force a mistake or two. That would be a key to this game as well. So can we see that? Can the run game for the Falcons finally take over? They haven't really done that in several weeks. So a lot of storylines to watch here. I do think the Falcons are rightly favored. They definitely played better at home as well. But it's probably going to be a 3 to 5 point game. So I think the spread is pretty dead on in terms of what whether you want to go under within that spread or not. I think that's a pretty open question, but I definitely think we'll both be sweating at the end because that's just what these teams do to us. There's no comfortable games here. So
the Vikings were up by 2 scores at the end of that Packer game, and we were all worried they were going to blow it. So
yeah, very familiar. Yep. Yes, but we're on the opposite sidelines on this one, Tyler. But I think after this we'll go back to being brothers in pain because that's what these teams do to us. So
yes, they do.
Yeah, guys, he is Tyler Forness at The Real Forno. Friend of the show, Tyler. Anything you want to plug? Anything else you want to add before we sign off today?
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have a multitude of preview content at the Vikings Wire, and you can go search my show on YouTube, The Real Forno Show, on the Vikings First and Skull YouTube channel. We did a huge breakdown on Jaren Hall and kind of what to expect from the Viking side of things, and I'm the biggest believer in Jaren Hall outside of his family, so if you want to see what he potentially could be in this offense, I recommend you go check that out. And then I also host a wrestling pod, The Good, the Bad, and the Hungry, talking about All Elite Wrestling, which is, it kind of sucks right now, but everything goes in waves, and I'm hoping they kind of bring stuff around. And that's my stuff.
Cool stuff there. Yeah, I mean, I definitely was a little bit intrigued by AEW when it first started. I haven't been following it closely, but so I'm sad to hear that it's a little bit on the fritz. But like you said, sometimes it's cycles of stuff and things get better or worse over time. So we'll keep the fingers crossed there because I think more good wrestling is always beneficial. Just even if you're like me and you just sort of pop it on sometimes just for the chaos and enjoying it, like not knowing all the storylines and just seeing the craziness happen in front of you. It's a lot of fun, so definitely appreciate that. And check out all of Tyler's stuff, guys, on Vikings Wire, as well as the Real Forno Show and First and Skull channel there. So I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, guys. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast audio, leave us that 5-star review on your platform of choice. If you want to support the show on Patreon, get some exclusive perks for the podcast, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Today's show was, of course, brought to you by betonline.ag and sponsored by Prize Picks. Folks, we will be back for the post-game show on Sunday, hopefully celebrating a dub, but at the very least, let's have no more catastrophic injuries because that's just the worst. So injury-free game, hopefully a fun game, and we'll go from there. We'll see you guys on Sunday. Have a great day, folks.